Layoffs once again mounting in the tech industry. There have already been tens of thousands of jobs cut over the past year, and two tech giants have just announced plans for another round of layoffs.
From 15,000 layoffs, though, announced by Intel 2 weeks ago, they really are struggling, to a 15% cutback announced just today by GoPro. Bay Area tech workers are nervous. High interest rates, slowing company investments, combined with fears of an economic slowdown, have led to lots of layoffs. And now some HR experts are advising techies looking for a job to think small. Intel says it's cutting 15,000 workers. Cisco says it's laying off 5,000. Just the latest in a wave of big tech companies making plans to get smaller and leading many to worry we're heading into a tech slump.
Let's start from the beginning.
And as today's jobs numbers make clear, Bidenomics is working. Last month, we created 187,000 new jobs. That means today 187,000 more Americans are able to go to work, to provide for their family and invest in their future. Today's numbers reflect the point that President Biden has made many times. America's economy is strong and experiencing stable and steady growth.
My inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world.
And it could fuel more uncertainty about the health of the labor market, and Americans themselves are seeing their own job prospects potentially decline. 70% of employees are bracing for layoffs, according to a Market Watch survey.
With an economic downturn, pretty much every sector of the economy is going to be impacted.
Let's unpack how big government spending impacts affordability in America. So the Labor Department data has now shown massive price increases since the year 2000 in several sectors with a high level of government involvement. Yes, that's right. Since 2000, hospital services, guess how much they're up? 252.5%. College tuition up almost 173%. Housing up 103%. When they put their paws in, it doesn't work out.
Hey, Randy, I don't know about you. I'm fielding some conflicting commentary about whether the line about unmistakable labor cooling reflects some incremental worry about labor than we heard in the July presser. Do you have a sense of that?
We'll start to see with greater force towards the end of this year, the last quarter of this year. You'll start to see, I think, a more substantial weakening of the labor market. That doesn't necessarily mean recession, but I think a more substantial weakening.
Almost 1 million jobs just vanishing into thin air. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is downgrading the total number of jobs created between April 2023 through March of this year by 818,000. I had to go back to elementary school to figure out how to say that, making it the largest downward employment revision in 15 years. And it's not a headline that Vice President Harris wants as she campaigns and takes credit for the good parts of the economy.
By virtually every measure, our economy is the strongest in the world. We have created 16 million new jobs.
You know, I know you're not a political guy, Vance, but obviously any rate cut in this environment and the robust market response, at least it gets ahead of the fact. That's the wind at the back for Kamala Harris, a little less so for Donald Trump. But what do you think?
Yeah, pleasure to be with you, Neil. I mean, you're right. This looks kind of strange right before the election to be cutting interest rates, but it's something that we oftentimes will see, that we will have it where a Fed chairman will wait until after the election. But given the situation right now, it seems like, for what he's saying at Jackson Hole, Chairman Powell, that they will cut interest rates. One thing I would just flag is that, inflation is still running pretty hot. I know we've seen it moderating. It's getting closer to their 2% target, but we're not quite there. We've got to remember what happened during the 70s and the 80s when they started cutting interest rates and putting more money in the economy. Inflation soared again. And then we had a double dip recession in the early 1980s. So we got to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, and that led to Paul Volcker getting appointed the Fed chairman to reverse what Arthur Burns had done because he had gone too far. You're quite right to remember that. Gary, I mean, there is this fear, too. The Fed always has to balance, these inflationary pressures with delaying a response to them and triggering a slowdown or worse. I mean, are we in danger of that as you see things right now?
Prices are still way up. the rate of the inflation is down. If the rate of inflation starts ticking back up, I can promise you the 10-year yield at 3.8, well, you'll see it at 4.25, 4.5, and then we can be in the soup. So it's something that has to be watched very, very carefully. To think you're winning on inflation because you took rates back up after printing to $9 trillion, I'll give them that. I think there has been some normalization from where we were. But I keep an eye out on every single day. And again, he's taken victory laps while people can't afford food and housing right now. I'm not so sure that's a smart move on his part. I think it may not be in the last chapter of this.
The private sector is in a recession. So let's just call it like it is and recognize the fact that the Fed has, I think, my opinion is that the Fed and other central bankers have delayed rate cuts, because of the unsustainable fiscal spending. I think they're getting a handle on the fact that it's going to stop, and now they've got to start cutting aggressively. This is not a normal economy, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people on how rapid rate cuts happen. Financial crisis always force the Fed's hands, and with extreme levels of debt, the extreme tightness of the Fed has caused damage around the world. That the yen carry trade was a direct, and the crash because of it was a direct response of the Fed staying too tight for too long. If they don't start cutting, the risk is not a recession. The big risk is a financial crisis. And I think Powell will not use Section 13.3 of the Federal Reserve Act ever again. And people are going to be surprised that when the Fed cuts, that the private sector is going to take a very, very long time to respond. And that's the big risk.
Will Bidenomics continue under Vice President Harris? Will Bidenomics continue under Vice President Harris?
In other words, how you call, the economy is going to continue with all those legislation you passed. It's working. In case you haven't noticed, it's working.
How much does it bother you that Vice President Harris might soon, for political reasons, start to distance herself from your economic
She's not
plan?
going to.
You don't think she's going to?
Is there a Venn diagram for this?